I want to start off our session with a note of gratitude to Daniel. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Fantastic. To Daniel and to Ozcan for providing us the forum to develop this special issue on foresight in North America. Daniel, for you to focus on it during your podcast, it really, we're very, very grateful for what the two of you have done. For those of you that have just jumped in, I have put into the chat box a file, Daniel's allowed me to do so, which is the cover of the issue, the front page of all of the articles that are in there, just to give you a very good overview. And on that, Ozcan, can I bring you in just to say a few words on behalf of the journal?
Hello, everyone. So it's great to see my good and old friends and to meet the new ones. So I'm very pleased to be here as the editor of the Foresight Journal, the Journal of Future Studies, Strategic Thinking and Policy. I'm Ozcan Saritas now. I'm joining the meeting from Moscow. It's rather late in here, but I'm still full of energy. So happy to be with you. I see that there's a great accumulation of minds in here, a beautiful collective intelligence, which I'm happy to be part of. So I'll give some introduction to our journal very briefly. First of all, Foresight Journal is a bi-monthly journal championing future studies and literacy globally. So we have been a part of this ongoing UNESCO Futures Literacy event, and I think that was a great opportunity for many of you to come and visit us. So Foresight Journal has been there since 1999. So it's just over 2 decades. And I have been doing the editorship of the journal since 2009, so half of its lifetime has been with me. Foresight during this time is evolving and always trying to explore some new theories, new practices, new applications, and considers itself as a platform for bringing all great minds in the field together and disseminate this wealth of knowledge to the rest of the world. So we focus on understanding trends and drivers shaping the world, exploring alternative futures, setting priorities, and formulating strategies for action. So looking at the entire process of foresight, from beginning to the end, which is about action. The journal actually offers a much needed forum, as being one of the leading journals in the field, for thinking about the future and socio-technological innovations, and focus on, again, all those trends and issues shaping the future, new quantitative and qualitative methods, as well as case studies with some novel approaches. We have a great team in here. I couldn't actually put all the names, but I'm very glad to list our growing team of regional editors, which is also showing that we are covering pretty much most of the globe, but we are gonna expand in the new year. So I'm grateful to Jonathan, Dr. Jonathan Calof, for taking the editorship of North America. So he was appointed earlier in this year, and he has already done a great job as soon as he was appointed. And we have also regional editors from Latin America and Caribbean, from Russia, and also just last month appointed a regional editor from China, and from Africa, Middle East, and the rest of the world. So I would like to now hand it over to Jonathan, who has done an excellent job by putting together a special issue on North American foresight. A special issue on North American foresight is very much needed. North America is home of foresight, where foresight activities started in the middle of the 20th century. Since then, a lot has been done, a lot has been developed, and a lot has been written. So we are very happy to be a part of this to be a part of this special issue, to be the platform to distribute, to disseminate this latest knowledge we got in North America. So with this, I'm handed over to Jonathan.
Thank you, my friend. When we did the call for papers, it was broad. It really, really was. And, you know, I debated when I did the guest editorial with Peter, do we say this represents North American scholarship? So, but he pointed out it's not a survey. It's whoever responded. And as impressive as it was, can we say this is the state of foresight research in North America? What we can say is, boy, is it impressive with the number of papers that came in. And a couple of kudos here. Number one, not only were there so many papers that came in, that even with a pretty high rejection rate, we landed up with 2 special issues. So that's a credit to everybody here. There's also a big thank you, and that is because everybody here also served as a reviewer. You had that opportunity to review other papers and help out. Not review your own paper. No, that would never happen. But it's indicative of not just the state of scholarship that we get so many papers, but it's indicative of the state of, I called it the integration, that we all work together, the friendliness of North American foresight, that there was no hesitation in this group to say, yeah, I'm going to review. You did not come back to me and say, I'm so busy. Isn't it enough that I've written a paper for you? And even on revisions, the same thing happened. In the word of my culture and Alex Wilner's, we call it a bunch of mensches, right, Alex? There we go. That's the Hanukkah thing for today, since we're in the midst of the holidays. But the one thing that also impressed me was that, and I was having this conversation with Crystal beforehand, is the extent to which, as we talked about, that the North American special issue isn't just about academics and academic theory, as important as it is. As you go through the issue, you also see the importance of pragmatic, practical application. We've seen in the issue the academic and the practitioner working together on it. And so, you know, the first article not by us goes to Martin. It's to you and Alex. So tell us a little bit about who you are, a couple of highlights from your paper as well. I want to get a sense as to, you know, what you saw foresight as and where you saw it in the paper.
Yeah, sure. I can start, and then Alex will follow up. I'm a bit of an anomaly in this group, as you pointed out, in the sense that I'm primarily and foremost a diplomat, and then a foresight practitioner. So I don't have the depth of knowledge you have and experience in terms of applying foresight. But I guess the value added of our paper, I guess, is really connecting foresight in the real world in large organization. I must say I'm quite proud that we've established a foresight unit within the Foreign Ministry 5 years ago. And it's actually now recognized as a function that is actually needed in the department. And my colleague Alex actually provides training to diplomats 3-4 times a year. So we're actually mainstreaming foresight across the organization, and has been taking place for at least 2-3 years now. So that's this year's the 5th anniversary. So I'm quite proud of what we were able to achieve. In terms of the paper itself, I'm not going to go into the details. You can read it, but I guess the first point I would make is that often when I was started to practice and get into the foresight community, there was a lot of discussion about the methodology, the best foresight practice. But I found that there was not so much in terms of how you anchor foresight in sort of large organizations. And I basically, what the article outlines, it's some of the challenges and opportunities that in applying foresight in a context like that with people that basically initially just don't care. They know it's a buzzword. Sometimes they like it, but they don't understand it. So you really need to tailor your approach to basically, so it resonates with people that just don't have time. So that's one of the first contradiction. I'm working in an organization that's really geared towards a very short-term outcome and output, and having to force them into sort of a long-term thinking perspective has been quite a challenge. And I think the part of our success has been to really sell Foresight, not as an exercise for the future, but as actually informing current policy. The other part of our success, I guess, is when we approach our client, whether it's senior management, deputy minister, we rarely start having conversation with them about Foresight. We actually approach them on the basis of their mental models, their assumptions, and then we bring Foresight, sometime using the back door. And it's worked very well. Actually, we're promoting Foresight, but we spend as much time discouraging using Foresight, because bad Foresight can be quite detrimental to what we're trying to achieve. The problem now, it's a bit of a buzzword. Everybody wants to do it, but then we're being forced in doing Foresight that is not actually consistent with what it should be done, how it should be done. So I guess that the hard lessons is that you really need to be clear about what Foresight does and it doesn't do. And so I guess that's the sort of the main approach we've taken. And I guess we had to. So the article you have before you is actually there's little about Foresight itself, but it's more about my work, how you convince people in large organizations. And I think there's some value. I know that Peter Bishop and others, there's numerous literature on how you apply Foresight in large organizations. But I think in our case, I think we bring some distinct flavor to it. So some of the issues you will find have been approached in other articles. In our case, it's been sort of anecdotal evidence collected for a number of years. So, but it could provide the basis for a more systematic approach. And I think, Jonathan, you started that work this year. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to turn to Alex, but happy to engage on that issue.
And before Alex goes in, and Martin, a big thank you. Martin's talking about a study I'm doing with a former government officer, Brian Colton, on impact success factors. To do this study, we surveyed the top practitioners in Canada and asked them, who do they see as being the leaders in the government for Foresight practice that had the units? Because we were using an expert panel. Martin's name came up a lot, but he was on sabbatical. We also asked about experts. Alex Wilner's name came up as the guy that provides a lot of the training, subject matter expert. So when I get an article that is from the acknowledged expert academic trainer and the acknowledged expert people go to how to run a unit, I get very excited. But for those of you on this call, this is about building a North American Foresight network. This is really what it's about. You're now meeting two people who are acknowledged in the field for their expertise, and I urge you to draw upon them as the days go on. Alex?
That's very kind, John. And thank you, everybody who's involved in, not only the journal and the special issue, but also putting together this panel. And Martin, thank you. It's been a pleasure to work with Martin over the years. Let me tell you, the motivation that Martin and I have moving into the article was to help Canadian government Foresight survive, right? That's like, it's implicit in our research. It's that there is something happening in Ottawa. We are part of it. We want to be part of it. And we want those organizations that are test driving Foresight to thrive within the government, because we buy in, because we believe that everybody should be doing Foresight to the improvement of Canadian policy. But I can tell you now, right, the observations that Martin has from global affairs and my observations from working with probably a dozen different Canadian government organizations, departments, agencies, is that they need some assistance. They need some assistance in understanding how Foresight works, how to link it to the policy, how to sell it, how to pitch it, and so forth. So to build on kind of the larger constructs that Martin already shared with you, I just want to share two other observations. And again, these are personal observations or anecdotal observations that I've had engaging with these groups, training these groups. And they're not necessarily indicative of what's happening at Global Affairs, but I think that's part of the story. I think the first, ultimately, and this isn't new to everybody, I think, but from our experience, there's a mismatch between Foresight and then the expectations of the non-Foresight community. So it takes a ton of work to do foresight properly, right? Just to train and identify those government employees is a task. This isn't a skill set that you acquire in a normal graduate program in Canada. So you need to get special training. And then you need to have people do proper scanning, which in itself can take months. And then you got to do the stakeholder meeting, all the futures wheels and the diagrams and the cascades and the scenarios. And at the end of this, months and months of work, you get a 50-page report. And the disjoint is, from the non-foresight community, that was a lot of work for not a lot of deliverable. And we're living through this, and I hate the terminology, but Canada's going through this deliverology approach to government. If you don't prove your worth, you're not worth. And so foresight has to continuously sell its purpose. And I think that's unique to the foresight experiment that other more traditional approaches to policy aren't experiencing. So that disjoint needs to be tackled, and Martin has done so successfully, but many of the other smaller units are always at risk of being eliminated. That's basically where they're skating on thin ice. That's a Canadian analogy. They're skating on thin ice, and they risk kind of falling into the water because they don't have the foundation to build off. A second, and then I'll shut up and move on, but a second observation, and it's related to this, there's a mismatch between the Canadian bureaucratic process and the ethos of foresight. And again, this isn't unique to Canada. I think this probably exists in many of your experiences, right? But government is traditionally risk averse. Yeah. It's concerned with immediate fires and the grind of day-to-day policy making. And foresight is the opposite. Foresight is speculative, it's blue sky thinking, it's creative, and the rest. And that disjoint is a kind of a cultural mismatch, if you will. And so, in speaking to the analysts, unless they are specifically mandated to do foresight, they simply don't have time, or they're carving out time beyond everything else they're doing. So that's the first issue. And then, the culture within Canadian bureaucracy is risk averse. And yet foresight asks you, what are those assumptions that are embedded in policy that don't coordinate well to the future? Well, it's just a different language, and the bureaucracy isn't necessarily ready to absorb that. So those are kind of two very high level observations to add to Martin's observations that we're experiencing here in Canada.
So Ozcan, from what you've heard from Alex and Martin, I can see all the head shaking up and down. I'm not sure if one of our next special issues, or it's going to be a book, will be called "Why Don't They Love Us?"
Absolutely, yeah.
I think it really is, because this is something that we're going to hear over and over again. But congratulations to your success, training 3 times a year, getting people to notice, getting that rep. It's something we're going to have to look into, and that's part of our study, to figure out how did you do it when others have failed. And that brings me over to Crystal, because you are the next article in the special issue. And you're another one of those rare birds, only you're that rare bird because you are an academic and a practitioner and a policymaker. You are not just schizophrenic. I don't know what you say when there's 3 or 4 levels to put on here. Crystal, introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And thanks to everyone who has put this together. And I'm really privileged and excited to be a part of this group. I started my foresight journey about, I want to say 5 years ago now, where the Caribbean was going through a regional project looking at how do we try to anticipate the future. And I was tasked with putting together these socioeconomic scenarios for the future, and I had no idea how to do that. And that's where Manchester University came in, and I got the training there. And immediately I understood this was the missing piece of the puzzle as it relates to policy formulation here in the Caribbean. And rightly, as Alex just said, there is this huge disjoint between how government policy is formulated. It's very short term. Politicians and policymakers are always thinking about the next election, how they can out the next fire. And what you have is like this hodgepodge of policies along the way that don't connect to each other. And it affects our development as small island states. So, but back to the paper, what we did specifically here is we tried to understand how different societal futures combined with global climatic changes affect freshwater demand across various countries here in the Caribbean, because most of these countries are water scarce. And if you are trying to develop strategies for the future, one of the things that you have to kind of look at is how do your scarce resources have pressures on them based on different societal changes. And that's across a broad spectrum of societal changes, along with what's happening at the global level in terms of climatic changes. So that was a very interesting piece of work that we did. And one of the lessons learned that we found was persons who develop policy, particularly their reference point, is really traditional. It's tied in these assumptions and these locked in boundaries that they have about the business as usual. And breaking them out of the mold was extremely difficult. It was extremely difficult. But once they were out of that mold, we found the creativity that came about in developing policy options for those various futures and looking at, okay, what is the most robust option that we have going forward? They then automatically saw the value of it. More so as a next step, because I know we don't have much time and I'm looking at the clock. For me, COVID-19 is that next opportunity. And what I'm going to try to do here in the Caribbean is try to get governments to imagine alternative development pathways that are not embedded in neoliberal economics, that are embedded in how do people and the planet thrive based on these new concepts of economic theory, coming out of a post-COVID environment where we've seen industries like the tourism industry being completely decimated. And we're now looking at how do we diversify our economies, but not just solely for profit, but for environmental regeneration and human well-being. So for me, it's now trying to get policymakers to look at what are those alternative development pathways. And it just happens to be my doctoral thesis. I'll just throw that in there. So I'm hoping that this goes well. But I think it's an exciting time for Foresight. Right now, COVID has shown us a lot of the assumptions that we've done or we've lived based on do not necessarily work. They're inequitable, and we need really these new development pathways. And for me, Foresight is that tool that I'm going to use to drive different policies going forward in the future.
And in fact, Crystal, you bring up something important, to share with the group. The folks that I know in government in Foresight and my corporate Foresight folks are really busy right now because this is a systematic, complex problem, COVID, where companies are going, they have two choices: give up, which they're not wanting to do, or who's the part of the organization who knows how to deal with complexity, tag, you guys are it. So you kind of have it'll be interesting to take a look at how we're all taking advantage of this opportunity to build the profile of Foresight as we go forward. So Crystal, very, very good thing to bring up. And I thank you again for your contribution to the special issue. We are definitely going to continue. And,
thank you so much, Jonathan.
Oh, it's my pleasure to do this. Let's see who I can put up next on this one. Okay, Shelley's not here. I think I skipped by somebody. Alan. Do I have Alan Carty here? No. I remember he was going to come in here. I'm going to be going back and forth because I zoomed too quickly. Jane, you're here. You are my next one. Jane,
okay,
you're the first one coming in here with some very strong theoretical background that I think is important to share.
well, thank you. Yeah, I am an academic, and I've been dean at various universities, and most recently I've been working with two specific groups, a group that identifies themselves as participating in communities of the future, and another group that is working through the Kaufman Foundation, and they sort of identify themselves as ecosystem builders. And I'll let you read the paper, but what I want to communicate is my process, because anytime I write, I learn. And I have to say, this paper went through many renditions, And, the first couple of renditions, Peter was giving me feedback on, well, are these really representative? Well, no, they belong to these groups. And it was really about the third version of the paper that I realized, these are unique futurists. These are, and so I've kind of coined this phrase, ecosystem building futurists, because they do have a different mentality. And what I was interested in finding out, and I basically, the overall question was, what is their relationship with the future? And that, of course, comes out of the futures literacy literature very much with, do people sort of have an emergentist, relationship with the future or whatever? And so that was sort of the guiding question. And to ask that, I was trying to get at, what do they do? And I really, Andy made the comment about stealth foresight. In the comments here, several of them, about a third of them, were traditional futurists who worked either for their own companies or in organizations. And they sort of had to do that dance of being a futurist and then serving the needs of their clients. But I didn't really realize until actually about 3 weeks ago, I was in a Association of Professional Futurists meeting. And two of the sort of traditional futurists got into this sort of bull seal fight. I don't know if you've ever seen the seals in San Francisco where they are bumping chests. Well, these two guys were doing that metaphorically over the issue of should futurists be going into organizations to change things? And, one of the key findings with this group of futurists, with these ecosystem building futurists, is one of the characteristics of all of them, without exception, was they felt their job was to make fundamental transformational societal change. And that's what drove them. That's what really pushed them forward. And again, that was sort of my, oh yeah, that's what, well, then 3 weeks ago when these two guys were having it out about, no, that's not our job. Our job is to go in and do what the client needs. And I love it when I have those moments of disruption, because it makes me rethink and realize that I don't think like most people. And not that I have to be reminded of that, but it is helpful. So I really enjoyed the process of this paper. And again, I'll let you read the actual details of sort of where they were coming from. One other aside, when I framed this, I started out framing it from a futures literacy perspective, from the idea of what is their relationship with the future. But I also framed it, if you've looked at the knowledge base of futures that just came out, with sort of this what, why, how, and who questions. So what do they do, and how do they do it? And the one final thing I'll leave you with was the power of the metaphors they use to describe why they did it. And the power of their metaphors included very organic, dynamic, relational kinds of metaphors. And so that's sort of where it came from. So.
Jane, again, here we go back again, the theoretical basis applied to practical, pragmatic, organizational context, but this time from a futurist. Jane, Peter and I, we put this together. He's a futurist / foresight. I'm foresight / competitive intelligence. And Jane, you came in here as a futurist. How do you see us as being the same? How do you see us as being different? Because you emphasize that futurist word all the way through. And to Ozcan and to Daniel, who are the publishers, this is kind of cool because it really does suggest that the journal serves a broader spectrum.
Well, and I think you guys really extended that conversation nicely with your gentle probes and questionings about, as I was trying to articulate and describe, there were 15 people, by the way, that I interviewed for this. And as I was trying to describe who they were as futurists, and they all did self-identify as futurists, it was real clear that there was a very unique orientation that they had. And the more you guys pushed me to think about that uniqueness, the clearer it became to me sort of where my little corner is. And my little corner as an academic futurist, I think, has a different role in advancing the field. Part of that role being my obligation to my students and to creating, people who can think about foresight in unique ways. But I think that also extends that conversation about we each do have different roles. So I'm not sure,
Right.
Jonathan, exactly if that's where you wanted me to go, but
No, that's
it really
perfect. That's
helped me
absolutely
clarify
perfect.
that.
Yeah.
So I really appreciated that opportunity.
Oh, and Jane, thank you for being part of this. And once again, Jane's comment in here is she's responding to the CI person and the Foresight person and going, hey, you made me think.
Yeah.
All right. And that is, and I can't speak on behalf of Europe, and I won't do that, but to sit in my community in North America and have academics say to academics from another field, not, go to hell, you're not part of my field, but to have her go, this is kind of neat. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Jonathan. That is something that I think is very precious about what we have here and why I wanted to continue. Peter, welcome back. Andy, tell us a bit about you and about your paper.
Sure. Well, at the University of Houston Foresight program, and we've been, Peter started the framework process, gosh, back in the 90s. We've been tweaking it ever since. And a couple of years ago, we decided, there's been enough change that it's time to sort of say something about that. And so I think I have 5 things that I think we all might find useful. One is in what we call our framing step in the beginning. We've been using the 3 horizons framework, and I guess we've also been using it at the end in terms of framing our recommendations. Do this in the first horizon, do this in the second, do this in the third. So it's kind of bookending the process. I got to tell you guys, it's simple, right? It's a simple tool, but it's, we've been talking about how, needing to be more connected to clients. They get that. I mean, it's just such a useful little concept that's really helped the translation of our work. So I love it. We use the 3 horizons a lot. So that's something that we baked in a little more formally. I think the second thing is, when we talk about our scanning step, and we've all, we continue to do traditional horizon scanning. We've made a little distinction between, we've always had some tension between sort of general scanning and then specific research about the future. And I like this idea that we talk about scanning as any signal of change, and then futures research being more about specific types of information about the future, which now we've boiled it down really simple to trends, issues, plans, and projections. And I think that, I don't know, for what that's worth, that distinction seems to help, right? That the scanning is anything, the research inputs are that focused information about the future. So that was the second thing that we've done. And somewhere, I'm not sure if it's research or if it's in the futuring/forecasting, but we used to go from these scanning and research inputs directly to scenarios. It seemed like that was a bridge too far, right? It was a big leap to get from these little pieces of information to stories about the future. So we formally added in a driver's step, and basically consolidating the research into a set of core drivers, anywhere from 6 to 12. And again, boy, I just think that's really helped our clients, because, again, I think they were confused by all the research, right? Like, like it's too much. But, a half dozen drivers or so, yeah, I get that. So I think we found that to be a really useful step, that sort of interpretation, right? So that was the third thing that we've done different. And then in the fourth, so we've always talked about, different, and Peter and I wrote this paper. Well, Peter wrote it and I helped him a little bit on the different, when we did a big analysis of the different scenario techniques, and we found there were like 23 techniques, blah, blah, blah. And there's lots of different ways you can tell the stories about the future. I think as a teaching tool, we've kind of settled on, I guess you'd call it a modified version of Jim Dator's 4 archetypes. And again, is a teaching tool, just simple, right? I mean, I guess we've been doing a lot of work with new to Foresight people, and it's really important that you keep it as simple as possible. So we've had some really good luck of using those archetypes as kind of like frameworks to tell the story about the future, and it does seem to produce a robust set of futures. I guess one little just little nugget for something that we need to gnaw on. We're starting. We actually see a little bit of a pattern in how the archetypes themselves evolve across the 3 horizons. But that's probably the next session, something way down in the future. But we talk about the baseline future of continuity, a transformation future of a new system, and then there's a couple. There's a collapse version where it goes to hell, and then there's what we call a new equilibrium or a new normal, which is it seems like a horizon 2 transition step. So baseline horizon 1, archetype, collapse horizon 2, transformation horizon 3. And we've just started playing with that. And now we don't have the research to back up that that's actually how it happens, but I think it's there. So I mean, intuitively it makes sense. So anyway.
But Andy, what I like about the way you frame the article as well, I mean, evolution of the Foresight. You and Peter have done so much work at the university down there. I love that you linked it back to your clients. I like the way you say how it's evolved. So now let me ask you the future question. How do you think it's going to continue to evolve?
Well, I mean, we have one more piece in there. So like just to finish that up, and maybe that's part of the evolution is we, in terms of like, how do you deliver the client message? At the end, we say, we developed options for each scenario. If this scenario happens, here are some good things to do. If this scenario, here are some good things. And now we're actually putting it, we call it an integrated strategic approach, where we try to give a sense of direction across the scenario landscape. And, have them like literally draw some lines. And if it goes this way, and like, how do you kind of play across the whole thing?
Yeah.
Like, what's your approach there? And boy, I got another thing that's really helped in terms of the clients feeling like that I understand this. I guess in terms of future directions, I mean, one of the things there's so many great tools out there. Like a lot of times we'll plug in a CLA, a causal layered analysis module. We might plug in a little integral futures exercise. And I guess the experiential futures, could we do more of that? And so there's all these great tools that you can kind of plug and play. And I guess we're trying to think of, how can you sort of offer that massive toolkit in a way that doesn't overwhelm people, right? And so I guess we're still playing with, with that, because there are so many great tools out there, and we're kind of like we say, look, we're the meat and potatoes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 basic steps, and not not a lot of sexy stuff, but we kind of sneak it in there a little bit. But how do we really get the full flavor of the toolkit into the process? I guess that's probably a good, maybe a good next step to think about.
And Ozcan, that's right in your wheelhouse, because you are the master of articles on the analytical models that are out there, and you and I have talked about putting something together on that one. So that really is a good feeder into the need. In the CI program we had earlier, that was also mentioned as an absolute requirement to help on that skill tool set. So that's one for you, buddy.
Yeah. Took my notes.
Good. Good. Jen, I want to pull you in now here, because you are the next article, and once again, neat application to a real problem. So tell us a bit about who you are and a bit about the article.
Sure. Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks to all the folks that have been a part of this and to make it happen, by the way, in case I forget to do that. And for all the folks that have introduced me to this topic over, I guess, going on a decade, maybe 8 or 9 years now. And
Wow.
and it really, I just have to, can I call out, is it fair to call out somebody here and just say, Andy, your presentation along with the Riel Miller back in Toronto, really, I was always intrigued by this topic. I included it in some old material before that, but that was the thing that said, it was fantastic. So it was really an opportunity to, it opened my eyes, and what you were both talking about, I think it pulled me in. I sort of dipped the toe, but I wanted to jump in.
Is that not a demonstration of the big tent? I mean, I can't think of two people at more opposite ends of the spectrum, yet we did that session for like 3 years together, right? It was kind of fun, right? Because we were coming at it from such different altitudes, but it worked, I think.
Yeah, it really did. So I hope that's okay to take a second to make that comment. I'm Jan Kilkirka. Yeah, as you said, Jonathan, I'm not sure what I am in terms of pracademic, those kind of hats. I wear a lot of different hats. I'm the chair at a small place, Huron University College at Western. It's a founding school at Western University. You may know Ivy and some parts of Western, where I think, Jonathan, you actually went, if I recall. And so we're the small part. We're a liberal arts, as you see from this article, we're a liberal arts institution by, from a historical perspective. And so, I think I've always valued that. These are the types of courses and, approaches that intrigued me. I value looking at history. I value bringing in, the applied aspects, the drama. We see what other areas the design folks do with foresight, and that's all been intriguing to me. We want to preserve that. So we had a real problem to, you mentioned, Jonathan, people get called in, and others have said this, to solve problems. When they see change, we kind of, as practitioners, we're doing that as consultants. And I really like the notion, as Peter's mentioned, about what was it about kind of the applied versus the normative. So, we're trying to recognize a burning problem that was happening. We're having declining enrollments, and really, as a business person, we couldn't necessarily allow this to happen. So that was kind of the burning question. So we used a case study of ourselves, and it was a very reflexive, but also engaging with our alumni, our students, and fellow faculty and admins to get some insight into what they expected out of this. So put together some scenario precursors, some scenarios. We distilled them back down, I guess, to what's in the article. But it really, for me, the fun part was to bring in, the tie-in between traditional strategy. It's kind of where I started out, in my career, and what's being done here. I also there's a ton of things that have resonated already, so I'm not trying to go in multiple directions. But when we see that, as was mentioned, who are you going to call in terms of doing this kind of work, foresight, besides calling the folks on this call? Daniel, Martin, I'd love to meet you and invite you to an upcoming APF Canada session, and Jonathan as well, and others. But you call Andy. But it's in an organization, it's probably the strategy group, the corporate development group. So I've always thought that there's opportunity here to infuse this in our teaching, to help with the academic planning, and to really reflect on what strategy as a discipline should be too, in the long range planning aspects. So that's what this article was really focused on doing. I made some notes. A personal concern maybe, and I don't know if others share this, but I heard when Crystal, when you spoke, you sort of used the neoliberal concept. So in terms of as an instructor in business, we tend to have students that are maybe predisposed to some of those ways of looking at it, and I don't consider my role to change necessarily one way or the other, but I want to help them explore some alternatives to these things, and to make sure that we're recognizing the new realities, the go forward realities. So that's that kind of, I think, underpinned what we were doing. I wrote this with my colleague, Dr. Bill Irwin, who, like myself, has a lot of experience, pre-academy. And so Bill is, he moonlights like I do at the MPA program at Queen's in Kingston, Ontario, and is an expert in public admin as well. So this was something where we're dealing with an institution that, although small, many of the institutions that we're involved with, at least for the academics on the side, sometimes act a little bit big. Their bureaucracies can be big. So it was navigating through that. It was, I think, figuring out, as Andy said, distilling down what are the core drivers that we're seeing that are going to be part of the future. Not necessarily saving our own skin and jobs, but kind of looking at that, like trying to understand what is the match going to be between a student need and an institutional reality in the future, where we're preserving those things that are meaningful, that have been part of an academic experience for millennia, if you want to call it that. And I really appreciate Peter as well, inviting me to be part of a little group within that looking at the liberal arts. I mean, I teach in the management side, but my connection is true and authentic to preserving this reality for for the generations to come, if you want to use it.
For those two things that I want to point out here, and Jan, thank you for that. Number one is, because of that interchange between you and Andy, I'm expecting an article called Opposites Attract. Andy's laughing at that one. Okay. But I want, again, why do we come together? Second thing, for those who don't know why foresight and long-term thinking is important at the academic level, Jan, which is why I like that. In 1990, I joined the University of Ottawa, and the first committee I was put on was the PhD committee for the business school. 3 years ago, we finally got our PhD program. That was 25 years later. It takes time to go through the faculty, the university, the province, the Senate, that if you don't have long-term view integrated projects like you talked about, and I don't care if you're small, medium, or large, it's the same system, Jen. It's the same system at every university. I use the Wayne Gretzky analogy of saying we're going to skate to where the puck is going to be. Then I tell them universities move, well, a little slower than icebergs.
That would be definitely applicable.
That would be applicable. So I appreciate you showing this in your example.
All right. Well, thanks for the opportunity. I agree that the timelines, when we reflect what's just happened in the last 20 years in one's career, and the fact that some of our people we're interacting with that are younger, have grown up in the internet age, they're predisposed to a certain way of thinking, perhaps, and that's good and bad.
Yep, and it's interesting, Jan, because 10 years ago, we were doing our 2020 exercises. And you and I, who understand this domain, had university administrators saying, this is what we're going to see. And you and I looked at that and said, no, you're not. Technologically, we're not there. The pestle. Socially, students do like to get. It hasn't changed. And so I pulled out the Vision 2020 document and was giggling. And in fact, in my EMBA class was somebody that was a central admin in charge of it. And after taking the lecture on foresight, he went, it's not going to work, is it? And I laughed and I said, nope. And for those of you who know him, I had offered our university the use of Jack Smith, who at that point was the National Foresight Officer for Canada, noted foresight author, noted foresight consultant, and they felt they could do it themselves. So it's interesting to see how these concepts can be used to help. Crystal, you pointed out government. Jan, you pointed out how it's helping university. And Andy, you've pointed out a lot on the corporate side. But that leaves me, before I go to my co-author on this one, my co-chair, off I go to James, who's been very patient, but unfortunately, I don't know why, you're the last paper in the double special issue. We saved the best for the last.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Jim Kahn, and as you can see from the tagline, if you read my article, I am the very model of a modern major generalist. I started out as a specialist in mathematical social psychology, got my doctorate there, but I did my undergraduate at Reed College here in Portland, Oregon. And it was innovative at the time, and I was thinking about how should it be innovative in the future. So Jan, I'm really resonating with what you said. It makes me feel really good that there's another paper in this that is taking the same perspective I did. I was originally contacted by Jonathan to be a reviewer. And I agreed to be a reviewer. And then I started thinking, what am I going to do with this paper that I've been working on how we can think about how liberal arts educations can be, institutions can be better off. And it wound up being a viewpoint in the sense that I'm 78 years old. I was tracking my own career and seeing how I had evolved and saying, well, it took me a long time to get there. Is there a way of doing it shorter so that we can get younger people that get a leg up and are able to do it? And this led me to the concept that foresight, at least the way I did it, is a science. And but it is a science, but on the other hand, it's not a science. One of my reviewers, you might be on this call, objected to my calling it a science. This reviewer said it was an art, and I can see that point of view, but I'm a strong believer in Thomas Kuhn and the evolution of the concepts within science. And to me, foresight is based on logic, evidence, transparency, and all those other good things that we admire and why we call ourselves scientists. So foresight is a science, but because it's a different science, that got me to think about disciplines. Disciplines, as far as I can tell, were sort of invented in the 19th century and evolved throughout the 20th century. And we got all sorts of strange words that popped up: interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and they're used willy-nilly, unfortunately. So I invented a new one, metadisciplinary, because I'm a big fan of Bertrand Russell. And metadisciplinary means it goes beyond disciplines.
Yeah.
And what that means to me is if you're going to be engaged in serious foresight, you can't do it alone. You have to do it with other people. And yeah, this is right. You're right, Jonathan. We have a group here. And we come from different backgrounds. People have different training, people have different expertise, people have different orientations. But if we can learn to talk with each other, if we can learn to understand each other, then we can do something that is greater than the sum of our individual parts. And to me, that's what foresight is all about. It's taking different disciplines and going beyond them to do something. And so I wrote a viewpoint paper about this. And now what I'm currently doing is as I said, I'm a Reed College graduate and I live a mile from the campus. And unfortunately, because of COVID, I can't visit the president over there, but she's a friend of mine. And I'm trying to get to push the faculty, and it's a 25-year process, Jonathan, to think about how we can modify the curriculum of a liberal arts undergraduate education to prepare people to do it better, to do it more efficiently, so that we understand where progress is coming from. And I'm not talking about basic science, although I am talking about basic science. I don't believe in the Frascati definition of basic and applied. Science is either, I'm going way back to Bacon, science is either instrumental or it's non-instrumental. If it's instrumental, you do it because you want to get there. If it's non-instrumental, you do it because you're curious. But if it's instrumental, sometimes you have to be very, very basic before you know what you're going to do. So I'm an instrumental scientist. I used to be non-instrumental, but I got converted to becoming instrumental when I left academy and joined the RAND Corporation. And I got involved in trying to help people have a vision of the future and get what they're going to do. And this is my paper is basically a quasi-autobiographical story about how I got there and where it should go after I'm not doing it anymore. So there you go.
Now, Jim, am I to understand that you and Jan are going to talk afterwards, since he did the paper on the Liberal Arts College? You're trying to help the Liberal Arts College. Have I made
what I will say is, as Jan was talking, I wrote his name down, and it's my intention to contact him after this thing is over soon. First thing I got to do is I got to read his paper, which means I've got to be able to access his paper, and Emerald is making that a little hard. Yeah, I see the potential of this. Well, you've seen Casablanca. This could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship, Jan.
Here's the good news, Jim, is that Jan will send you a copy of his paper. I know he's got it.
Yeah.
I have
long as that's
mine
not
in the
contravening
final.
anything that happened.
I have mine in the final draft form, which I can send as an attachment to anybody who can't access, who's having trouble accessing the issue. I've
Wonderful.
also put in an email to Ashley to help me get it done, and I will send you, Jonathan, any intelligence she gives me about how to make this stuff to more easily accessible.
That is fantastic. Jim, thank you so very much. I mean, we're seeing such a diversity. Peter is back. I'll put him on shortly. That's Peter Bishop. I see we have Jim Miller came in, who's CI here. Peter Padbury is in, who is very noted in his practice. We're very privileged to have some of our wonderful guests here. I want to wrap up the special issue with Peter talking about his article, which I was so happy in the middle of a snowstorm for Peter to call me and say, can you come down and help me out on this process? And if you ever want to know the most difficult process ever, I respect Peter enormously. So all he has to say is get your butt down here. And that's an easy thing to do. But it was helping on cancer research. And I've got cancer. It's incurable. So imagine you're trying to assist in a strategic foresight exercise without letting anybody at the table know that you may have a vested interest. Very challenging, but also very enjoyable. And after Peter talks about his paper, there's some questions here. I told you folks, we'd go past the hour. That's the advantage of having your own Zoom account. I hope you can stay with us. And Dr. Ali, you will have the first question here. You have some really good ones in here, especially as it pertains to Canada. So Peter, I want to go to you. Just tell us a bit about your paper. And again, lots of gratitude for being my partner on this special issue. It doesn't get as broad as it is without your involvement.
This is wonderful, Jonathan. Thank you very much. We should do this for all the publications. This is a terrific opportunity to really get with colleagues and discuss our ideas and all the various things. So I want to thank you all for joining in. And I have to tell you that being a co-editor of this journal and this special issue was the easiest job I've had in years because Jonathan did all the work. So I want to thank you, Jonathan, for inviting me and for letting me put my name on this. And then for sponsoring us in this article. This article is actually the application of the exact process that Andy talked about. Okay. All right, stay-at-home order in California, sorry. It came about because I have a relationship with Canadians in Ottawa, particularly through the Conference Board of Canada. I've taught Foresight courses up there for almost 10 years now. And the Ontario Institute for Cancer Research in Toronto at the medical center down there got in touch with me and said, we'd like to use the Houston Foresight process to prepare for our required provincial strategic planning effort, which they had to do in the summer of 2018, and this was the fall of 2017. So I immediately contacted Andy. Andy does these kind of projects with students and graduates, and I said, Andy, I got a client for you. He said, well, it's too bad because we're already full up for the year. So I took this on as a research project. As many of you know, never really was a researcher, and less now with Teach the Future, but as a kind of guess loyalty to the brand, I'd say, okay, I will do this. And Andy helped me recruit 5 wonderful graduates of our program who actually educated me on all the tweaks that he talked about. I mean, I left the program about 10 years ago, and all the good stuff has happened since then. I've seen it in the certificate program, but I never saw it in action. So Maria Romero was the project manager, and 4 other graduates of the program were great. And we did that. I want to thank Jonathan for stepping up and being part of the final implications workshop there. He actually got to advise the CEO of this organization on the future. Shame on me that I have not followed up with them, except, of course, to the article. The 3 other co-authors are staff members and executive officers of that institute. It was a basic, standard process of foresight framework and foresight processes. And I certainly don't have the time to go into the scenarios we created or even the implications, but I can tell you that we ended up in the implications workshop, which was the only face-to-face meeting we had in the project because of financial considerations. But they came up with 4 excellent strategic issues, we call them, as a result of the implications analysis process that Andy put together right away there in the 20 teens. And so you can read the whole thing. This has also been a great example in my teaching for when people ask, well, give us an example, and I'm terrible at examples. I'm more of a conceptual person, but this has really helped out a lot there. So I want to thank you, Jonathan, for inviting me, and thank the rest of everybody for being part of the call. This has really been terrific.
But Peter, also, and this is something we can all chat about another time. Peter had me at the table with the CEO, which as an academic, seeing preconceived ideas shifting because of a process was really extraordinary. This was absolutely live. And Peter, you are so skilled at not telling people fill in the blank and sitting there calmly and letting the process do what the process is supposed to do. So a lot of compliments to you on this one, buddy.
It was a great day.
It really was.
That was during a snowstorm too.
Well, that's why I had to come down, because Andy couldn't come because of the snow. So you called me in Ottawa and said, can you go?
No, Maria
Maria
couldn't come. Maria couldn't come. She was in Minneapolis and couldn't get out that day.
But this is why I talk about the North American Foresight community. Is look at that. Peter, the practitioner, is calling Ottawa academic / practitioner in competitive intelligence. Can you get down here tomorrow? My person can't make it. And of course we help each other. And of course, Jan and Andy are going to talk together afterwards. And of course, the idea of why they don't love me is going to come into play, because that's what we do. And that's why when Peter and I wrote the editorial piece, we really highlighted the interrelationships between like organizations and how we help each other. And before I go to the Q&A part, because we do have a few questions, Ozcan, where did you go?
I'm here.
There you are. Good. I got to ask you, buddy, I'm putting you on the spot here.
Right.
This is one issue of 100 that you've been part of. I'm not asking you to compliment the issue. I'm saying, what do you think of what you're hearing? How does this differ? What do you like about what you're hearing here and what you saw in the issue?
Well, I should briefly say that I had never seen something like this before. So thank you. Thanks for making this happen, Jonathan. I really appreciate it. And I was just writing at the comments that this is the best special issue launch. Well, I had never witnessed a special issue launch before, so this is the best of all of them. But I love the idea. So someone proposed in here that I think all issues of the journal could be launched in this way, because this is a great platform. So everybody can express themselves, and we can just get first-hand information. And it is just so fresh, so hot, just freshly baked. So I feel so lucky. And thanks to you for making all this happen. And thanks everyone who contributed and who are now devoting their valuable times to be with us. This is much appreciated.
Thank you, my friend, for having the patience. And it's a good thing you like me, because when an editor says, I've never seen anything like this before, that can go one of two ways when you start out. And
in a good way.
You stuck with me through this process, and I'm glad it worked out for you. There's definitely going to be more. We do have time for questions. And Ellie, you had ones that you wanted to get in. Why don't you unmute and ask your question?
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, let me express my deepest gratitude and thanks to Dr. Saritas to invite me to privilege of addressing this convention. For me, it's so hard to speak with in front of this huge, PhD and professor in foresight. But if I want to tell my story, it could be interesting and funny why I attended this meeting. When I met 7 years ago, Ozcan, in a European conference in FDA, in Brussels, I was in the first year of the PhD of Future Study and Foresight. And the theme of conference was the democratizing foresight. So for me and Sohail and Ayatollah and also for Ozcan, it was so funny because, because after, I don't know, 100 years in Europe, because they are working to each other like foresight and everything, they were talking about how they can democratize foresight. And it was so interesting for me. So next year, me and Sohail establish the same network, Asia Pacific Futures Network. So now after 6 years, it's so strong, and so we did a very good venue last month. So, but the things that why I attended this meeting, because recently, I passed my PhD. I finished my PhD. I published papers in Foresight in the journal. I was reviewer in Foresight. But since last year, I was the regional editor of Future Studies, the Journal of Future Studies, Eastern part. So now, since this year, I am sort of like Canadian because I'm going to land in Canada. So that's why I want to know. That's why I want to know in the future, what's the challenges in foresight in Canada? Because I assume that I am working with this kind of research center in Canada. So I want to know what's the difference between, the challenges in Asia Pacific, and the Middle East that I was born and passed this kind of thing, my PhD. And what is the challenge? What is the main problem, the challenges in Canada?
It's a good question about what are the challenges in Canada. So I have two choices here. I can go to Alex, who is my lead academic, or I can go to Peter Padbury, who works with all the lead academics and wrote the award-winning article. So Peter, I'm going to pick you. Can you tell him a bit about the challenges as probably one of the top guys at Horizons Canada, around forever, lead futurist, love your title, and award-winning author. What's your answer to our new incoming Canadian academic?
Well, a few thoughts. I think Canada differs from, say, Canada is probably similar to some Asian countries in the sense that we're not a major economic power, and a lot of foresight actually goes into what I would call social and economic futures, but it's not really technologically or commercially driven. I know that across governments at the federal and provincial level, right now there's huge interest in foresight. It's, I would say, dramatically growing. Virtually every federal department in a number of provinces are attempting to build capacity in that area. So there's huge demand. And I would say that the key areas are how do we manage a transformation of the Canadian economy that deals with both the inequity question, the inclusion and diversity question, the sustainability question, and optimizes across all of those. That's kind of the top thing right now on my agenda. It's the Canadian government, the recent, we call speech from the throne, outlined those as the key transformations we confront. So there's huge interest, and we will welcome you into the community.
That's your contact point. And thank you, Peter. I'm going to also ask that question to Dominic Blakely, who not all of you know, but he's from University of New Brunswick and is very involved in bringing these concepts to entrepreneurs and startups. Dominic, how would you answer that?
Wow.
Right before your 1 month vacation.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Wow, what is there that's in the way? It's academically, I come from a different side. I am not, although I've worked in the academy for 18 years now. I am a practitioner. I do not write articles. I just work in the field with startups. I think the biggest thing is actually the translation from the policy direction into the application and real world process. There are a lot of people within the academies that are thinking about it, but from myself, trying to explain to people that it's a premise that needs to be put in, it comes down to the vocabulary that we use. There's a translation that's missed between how it's described in the academy and by the academicians, as well to those that are actually putting it in place in the field. Competitive intelligence, well, no, actually that's customer discovery. It's trying to figure out where the words move over. So depending upon the side that you want to do, I mean, you have all the some incredible people that are here that can help you hit the ground running in the academy. If you're looking more for a practical application, depending upon where you're going to be in Canada, work with the communities that are putting this in play, whether it's the NGOs and the social impact organizations, whether it's the economic development drivers. Again, though, it's such a different vocabulary, and it's fun sometimes that I get confused between my conversation, whether I'm talking to Jonathan or whether I'm talking to my startup groups. I sometimes use the wrong terms that Jonathan is putting into my head, and I say it to the students, and they kind of look at me as though I've got 5 heads, and it's like, what the hell are you talking about? So, I think that's it. I mean, if we can build a lexicon somewhere that actually translates A to B, from academy to practice, that would be fantastic. And I don't know if that was helpful in any way, shape, or form, but I mean, it's the thing that I'm hearing back and forth. So it's.
And since we're talking challenges, and I'm like that, Eileen, that you led in with that, because that also is about future research. I'll end this one by calling in another one of the people that are in the room right now, and that's Jim Miller, who is a practitioner, but also he's on the board of Special Libraries Association, which has been pushing very hard on foresight. So Jim, what do you see as the challenge? And you certainly got the academics, the researchers, practitioners here that you could speak to on behalf of your thousands upon thousands upon thousands of members.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you. I mean, I think that for Canada, it's something that, as Peter pointed out, it's particularly at the government level, it's something that's sort of just beginning to get started. And certainly, Jonathan, that we've been trying to get some more play within the government of Canada to get them to use the foresight and that type of thinking. And I think that I still think it's still burgeoning in Canada, just growing. And OCAT-U has a really great program in foresight. Unfortunately, Michelle's not here yet, but I mean, there's some great challenges, but I think that Canada has ways to go still. So. Yeah,
and I'm glad you mentioned OCAT. Michelle would have been here. They run a design-based foresight program that really has been. Peter, I know it's helped your operation. You've had people. Alex, I know you've seen it at the Carleton area as well. So that's certainly something we'll chat about at another time. Thank you for being so good about allowing me to pull 3 people who were just here watching into the conversation. All 3 of whom known that they wouldn't get away with me not calling them in. More space for innovation in Canada and the US. Jane, what do you mean by that? That's an interesting comment.
Oh no, I can't be the final dot on this, but I've often felt after my many years in academia a sadness that I am a dinosaur, that the luxuries I have to write and to pursue my own interests are pretty much not going to be what's offered in the future for most academicians. And while I think the practical theoretical divide is not a clean one, I hate to see the complete abandonment of theory. And I have found in a lot of areas, and just in this conversation, that Europe and Canada are a lot more open to theory and to embracing theory, even if you're coming from a very practical perspective. And it saddens me to think that the United States, at least from my perspective, has become so myopic about anti-intellectualism that we can't embrace the wholeness that's there, and we create the artificial divide and then throw out, half of the folks. So I applaud all the really great work that our northern colleagues are doing, even though it's in the snow, and I much prefer the sunny south, where it's
There's
70
not much snow
degrees.
yet. There's not much snow. Just
Okay, but that's global warming. That's not a good thing either. I mean,
I agree. I was
Yeah.
golfing on November the 11th when we should have snow on the ground. So yes.
right. Yeah.
That is an
But anyway, so I really do appreciate all the great work that's going on in Canada.
And Jane, it's an interesting comment you make, and Crystal, I'm going to pull you in because we've just heard a U.S. perspective. Dominic and I were working on a proposal in Foresight, and they needed approval by the president or vice president of the university. And Dominic goes, "Oh, no worries, I'm talking to him right now. We'll get it signed off this afternoon." And you're right, Jane. That is a very major difference that you see in some of the universities here and the relationships. Then I can't imagine any of my colleagues in the States going, "Oh yeah, I'm going golfing with the president. We'll talk about it on the golf course." So it's a very good observation, and even the extent to which you're seeing all of us working together. Crystal, from where you're sitting, we talked about the challenges in Canada. We've been kibitzing around. You've heard challenges in the United States. What are you getting from where you are?
Where would I start? Here in the Caribbean, I think, obviously, because as you can see, I'm the only one on the call from the Caribbean. That in and of itself says something. And when I started the Foresight journey, I had to go to Manchester just because there was no one in the Caribbean who was versed in the area enough to give me the tools that I needed to carry out the research. But what I would say is I do have a platform that allows me to break into those spaces, those policy decision makers, and have that national conversation and sometimes a regional conversation about the importance of foresight and how we need to mainstream it at the level of policy making. The other challenge, and this is more on the academic side, is I recently had a public lecture as well in terms of, what is the future of development? What does that look like for Caribbean states? Where are we going in the 21st century, given all of the external challenges and external shocks that could come our way, that increases the level of uncertainty and the complexity that we'll have to deal with as small nations. And I'm completely adamant about this, is that our economic students need to be taught foresight. That went over pretty well with the dean. I'm still to get a written confirmation about how we get that into the curriculum. But within my own experience and trying to build momentum and capacity, I'm very passionate about that as well. Because I think one of the things that the Caribbean lacks, as I said before, is that ability to think. It's almost like a luxury for us to think about the future. And I noted that term, the democratization of foresight, the developing world, and how do we and how are we involved in this process, and is it a luxury to think about the future coming from the developing world? So that's just my 2 cents on that one.
But also, Crystal, what's interesting, and this goes back to Jane, is that at least you're having the conversation.
Yes, definitely.
Right? And that's what she's envious of. We're kind of doing it here. You're having the conversation. To wrap up that part of the discussion, I can't think, I'm looking across here, I see Andy and I see Peter Bishop, and I go, wow, you guys do great business in Canada and you do business in the United States. You must have a unique perspective of what Jane was saying in terms of the two environments when it comes to really the environment, the appetite, the interest on foresight. So let's start off with Andy. Are you agreeing with Jane and with what you're hearing here? Do you see a difference between the countries?
Well, I guess I'd say, I don't know. I just don't even think of us as being in the US. I mean, we're here. But I mean, it has no relation to the work we do, and we have a lot of international students, and we just try to stay out of that whole mess.
Yeah. But do you see a cultural difference? And Andy, I'll throw my 2 cents worth in here. Many, many years ago, Jack Smith and I, thanks to a variety of support, started a global foresight network of leaders. And it was that UK head of foresight, Canadian head of foresight. So we had country heads. When we went to the United States, we scratched our heads and we said, who's in charge of foresight? Who's the leader? We couldn't find an identifiable government unit like a Horizons Canada, like a Foresight office. We said the US is different. That doesn't mean it's bad, but Jane says in a bad way. You're right, you're not United States, but you do have pretty good overview here. What are you thinking? And I don't want to put you in a bad spot, but just that.
Oh, well, certainly in the academic front, we're the only master's program left in the US, so it's not a friendly environment, but again, it doesn't matter to us. We don't care. I guess we think of ourselves as global. But in the government side, I mean, Nancy's here, and like the GAO has done some cool things. You got that Foresight practitioner networks that come together, and there's a lot of stuff going on. It's just not coordinated.
Nancy,
So,
you want to jump in on that one? You've been dragged in by Andy, so glad to have you here.
Yes, thank you. It's been a wonderful panel, and it's good to see Peter Bishop, Peter Padbury, and of course, Andy. It's pretty fragmented in the United States. Probably around 2013, a U.S. federal foresight community of interest that Andy has spoken to was convened. And so that group has been doing quarterly meetings since 2013 with people across the federal government to exchange information on best practices, et cetera. But especially if you look at what's going on with COVID, there just has not been a central point for foresight the way there is in Canada with policy horizons. Clem Beazold and I just did some presentations at a Future of Korea meeting last week, and I was going through the US response to COVID and looking at all the strategy and foresight efforts that were done in the last number of years, and wondering about, okay, what difference will the new administration make for foresight? Well, I think there will be an opportunity there. It'll have to be balanced with addressing pressing issues such as getting on top of COVID, which has just gone out of control in the United States. But I think those of us that have been watching what's going on in government in the United States feel more hopeful with the new administration. There have been a number of proposals, which I'm sure Andy and Peter are familiar with over the years by groups like the National Academy of Public Administration and other groups, Leon Firth's work on anticipatory governments, to have a central focal point. So hopefully one day it will occur, because there is a real commitment across the federal government and state and local governments to doing foresight. As Andy said, it just needs to be coordinated.
And I like, Nancy, when you mentioned some of the names of the people that have helped you, and getting back to the special issue, Peter in Canada, Andy in the United States. To you, Crystal, to you, Nancy, to you, Jane, I set this up because I believe there was more activity going on than people knew about. That's confirmed. I also set it up so that we could start leaning on each other to help, so that as you go through this, if you find some of the stories you're hearing here or some of the people are worthwhile to bring in for the dialogue, do so. That's what we've been set up to do. Let's hope it's not just the UNESCO conference is the first and the last time that we get to do something like this. Whether it's a special issue, whether it's a dialogue, we're going to be here to support each other. So Nancy, thank you for bringing that into the discussion. Good to meet you, even if it's electronic.
Yes, yes.
Any other questions from the gang before we close the sucker down? Because I said we go past the hour, but we're now at 90 minutes. And I've still got people alive here after a long conference. Any questions before we say goodbye?
I just want to make a comment, Jonathan, on this very last point Nancy and Andy were doing. they said that there's not like a central unit, coordinating foresight activities. This is the case actually in many places, so in many different countries. So we don't see anymore those large-scale national foresight exercises. This is not necessarily a bad thing, actually. This is on the one hand, yes, some probably forward thinking at the level of government has been lost. But on the other hand, this also indicates that foresight is now everywhere. So we know that there are a number of sites, number of different places, number of different organizations running their foresight exercises. So there is an ecosystem of foresight exercises. And then as the foresight knowledge or futures literacy becomes more kind of dispersed and more disseminated into the society, into industry, into academia, then we will see more of these activities going in parallel or in a kind of a cascaded way at different levels of governance and so on. What our aim should be probably at this moment is to help, to increase this kind of foresight literacy and to make sure that foresight is on site. So it is integrated. It is integrated into scientists' work, for example. So when scientists do their work, they think about not only science and future technologies they will develop, but also think about its broader societal impacts, its broader impacts for economy, its impacts for environment, ethics and law and different aspects. So if we can achieve this, and if we can bring this foresight on the agenda of day-to-day activities of scientists, industrialists, educators, and all other people in the system, I think we'll have done a good job by then.
I'm going to leave you with a story that exemplifies both what he said and the reason why, Nancy, you're right about trying to integrate the network. So when we did our global study and we looked at organizations doing environmental scanning, CI foresight, we found companies that had upwards of 8 or 9 parts of the organization doing it, okay, that didn't know the other part did. One of the larger companies had a foresight unit and a CI unit. When I went in as an academic and I said, what are you doing? First of all, they didn't like each other. Foresight thought CI was stupid. CI thought foresight was stupid. When I asked foresight what they did was classic competitive intelligence. When I asked CI what they did, it was classic foresight. Until we start finding each other and helping each other, and that's back to that skill set we talked about at the beginning, it's going to be hard to help Ozcan your vision occur with the growth in those domains. So Nancy and Peter and Alex and others that are trying to bring these communities together, it's critical if we're then going to diffuse concepts, skills, and meaning. And and Crystal, Nancy, that are working at management levels, they need to understand too, which is why Rial's literacy agenda is very critical. And on that note, really big thank you to all of you for staying 30 minutes past, for reviewing, for writing, and sticking around for what seemed like an eternity. Thank you all, and I hope you enjoyed the session.